Yellow and Red makes by Digits 27, Chapter 39. The single guard stationed outside of the Suna gate leaned against the passageway, only really keeping an idle eye on the desert horizon. There was nobody scheduled to even come to the village today, which was why he almost missed the two silhouettes approaching from the distance. Even then, it took him a couple of minutes to realize they were mirages caused by the intense heat that left most foreigners dizzy. He peered closer, trying to discern anything he could from the general haze the desert horizon held. Both figures were cloaked, one taller than the other, and he could spot blonde hair from the taller one. There was some kind of red pattern on the dark cloaks they wore, but it was too far away to make out. He alerted an Ambu he was sure would be watching with a few discreet hand signals, and got the reply in the form of sunlight being reflected from a mirror in equally discreet pulses. His attention returned to the cloaked figures, only to find himself staring at blonde hair. "Hey, Manny." The poor Chunin nearly jumped out of his skin and into the wall behind him, an unfortunate side effect of his surprise. "Naruto!" He stuttered because he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Manny knew Naruto when he was younger, having been assigned to catch him after one of his pranks. Back then, the blonde had simply been a young kid, a talented ninja, but still just a young kid of 12. Now the changes were startling. He had shot up in height, now approaching a respectable 5 feet and 10 inches. His normally shaggy hair had grown out into thinner and more pronounced spikes, and his bangs now hung down to his chin, equally spiky as the hair on top. "Well, at least you recognize me. When we went back to Kumo, Yujito nearly had a fit," he chuckled to himself, as did his smaller companion, who Manny only now took notice of. She must have been about 13 or 14, with shoulder-length mint-green hair that had tried to be spiky like her mentor, but didn't quite manage the same feat. The majority was held back by an orange hair clip that perfectly matched the startling color of her eyes. Her most notable feature was her caramel skin that made some of the tans in Tsunagakure seem tame. Not as much as the Raikage. He nearly passed out for some reason. Both laughed again at the memory of the normally unflappable A falling backwards off his chair when Naruto had entered his office. Manny just stared at the two, wondering who the small girl was, while at the same time wondering what they were talking about. "Naruto." The blonde finally returned his attention to the Chunin with a smile. "Hey, Manny, long time no see." The gate guard just nodded dumbly, still slightly taken aback at the shocking change to Naruto's appearance. "Yeah, 2 years." Naruto nodded with a melancholic smile. "I hope things haven't been too quiet without me around." Manny just laughed. Some of his surprise finally wore off as he realized this was still the same Naruto after all. Not with Matsuri around, that's for sure. Naruto just stared at him blankly, and Manny had to chuckle sheepishly. You'll see when you report to the Kazekage." Naruto just smiled brightly. "Awesome. I wonder how much Gar has changed." Manny just smiled politely and gave them the appropriate forms for them to fill out. Fu gasped as she took her first look at the inside of Suna's walls. Naruto had warned her that it was an impressive sight, but having been to both Kumo and Kigakuri, she didn't think it could measure up. She was wrong. She looked just as odd as Naruto had felt the first time walking through the crowd and lively streets, while Naruto just smiled at the nostalgia. They made quick progress through the streets, with both getting strange looks from the residents. Many peered at Naruto as they tried to figure out where they had seen the tall blonde before. Their faces were even more amusing when their eyes opened wide in realization, mainly because of the headband that he had made so recognizable over the years. Those that didn't recognize him instead looked at the amber-eyed one walking alongside him, turning 13 as she had just started to fill out her clothes in the way guys noticed. Naruto had recently found himself having to play the role of the protective brother, much to Fu's mutual ire and appreciation. It wasn't that he was possessive or dominating over Fu's life in general. If he was, he wouldn't have let her become a kunoichi. Instead, he just felt an overwhelming desire to protect her from anything, be it S-ranked criminals from Akatsuki to lecherous looks from teenage boys who began to appreciate her budding womanliness. They quickly made it to the Kazekage Tower, thoroughly shocking the receptionist behind the desk as she hesitantly buzzed them through into Gaara's office. Naruto had thought about making some grand entrance to try and surprise his stoic and immovable friend, but in the end he just walked through the doors with a smile on his face and an arm wrapped around Fu's shoulders. In the end, he was the one who received the shock as he walked in and saw two people he had missed with all his heart for over 2 years. Looks like I beat you home, shithead. Naruto was across the room in seconds, tackling Takuya to the ground in possibly the biggest hug he had ever given anybody in his life, and that included Fu. Ugh! Takuya suddenly found herself on the floor looking up into a pair of familiar cerulean blue orbs that stared back at her with unconcealed happiness that made the last 2 years simply melt away with familiarity. Well, doesn't this just make me feel left out? Naruto craned his neck to look at Gaara, who was just smirking at the pair. He stood up sheepishly, hand on the back of his head, and helped Taiya up to her feet with a strong hand. He took that time to look at her and couldn't have been more surprised. Like Fu, Taiya had filled out in all the ways that would make a man drool, including Naruto if he hadn't controlled himself. Her hair had grown out even more, and now reached down to the small of her back, while that ever-present bang continued to drape down between her eyes. She now wore a red sleeveless shirt that displayed her midriff and lightly toned abs with a fishnet t-shirt underneath that reached down only slightly lower. Instead of the normal shinobi pant that she used to wear, she now proudly stood in a tight red skirt that reached down to her mid-thigh and even tighter black spandex shorts underneath. To finish the look, she wore black fingerless gloves with metal plates on the back and standard black shinobi sandals. By now, Naruto had abandoned his cloak, and Toyo was eyeing him up in the same way. His whiskers had grown more pronounced with age, which matched his now slightly more angular face. He had lost his innocent, almost cherub-like features, but they were replaced by an actual handsome face. His eyes still sparkled with the same youth Taia had left him with when they parted, but now also contained a hardened edge. Speaking of somebody who had seen conflict, he still wore the black shinobi pants, but to his now taller size, with equally dark sandals on his left. On his feet, he also continued to wear a plain orange shirt that was no doubt reinforced with seals, but instead of his traditional green open jacket, he wore a long flowing coat. It was a deep red with black flames licking the bottom, and when it flapped slightly in the blaze, you could make out scrolls lining the inside, as well as more than a few seals. In all, it left Tayuya slightly speechless, and if both parties had to choose a single word to describe the other, it would be hot. Sorry, it's great to see you, Gaara. I hope being Kazekage hasn't been too stressful. The stoic sand user just smirked. He too had changed over the years. Like Naruto, his face had gained a more angular quality, and his hair contained the thinner spikes. The black markings around his eyes had also thinned slightly, and Naruto wasn't sure if that was because of age or any growing relationship between him and Shukaku. I found ways to keep it bearable. They all heard a chuckle coming from the corner of the room, and Naruto turned sharply. Is that all I am? A means of stemming off boredom? Naruto watched as the young woman who had spoken walked over to Gaara and surprised him by placing her arms around his waist, almost lovingly before resting her chin on his shoulder. She had a shoulder-length brown hair, which clumped into spikes at the bottom, and warm, dark brown eyes. She wore a dark t-shirt that matched her skirt, and equally dark tights that stretched past her knees. Her headband was wrapped around her neck, and she bore 2 metal arm guards. Of course, Nats. That's just a plus. Naruto raised his eyebrow at Gaara actually taken part in a small bit of banter. It seemed it wasn't only his appearance that had changed. Naruto, this is Matsuri, my fiancé. If Naruto had been drinking, he was sure that the liquid would now be successfully spraying across the room. Instead, his eyes just opened wide and elicited a small giggle from Matsuri with a deeper chuckle from Gaara. He remembered Matsuri from the year below them in the academy, but had never had any extended interaction with her. It's nice to meet you, Matsuri. She giggled again, and Takuya just smirked. I know, right? I was shocked as well. Who knew Gaara had it in him? Naruto just nodded dumbly, and Gaara was lucky that his sand armor prevented anyone from seeing his blush. Yes, well, now that the pleasantries are over, I believe Naruto has someone else we all need to meet. 4 sets of eyes all turned around to stare at Fu, who, until now, had been hiding behind Naruto. Despite being around him for so long, she was still incredibly shy when it came to meeting new people, especially when one of those people was the Kazekage, and the other one was her brother's girlfriend. Everybody, this is Fu, the Jinchuriki of the Seven Tails Chome. The mink-haired girl waved weakly but felt a bit relieved when all she received was warm smiles from everybody present. Fu, the smoking hot redhead there is Tayuya. Said girl immediately blushed and looked away from Naruto. The stoic redhead there is the Kazekage of Tsunagakure, Gara no Subaku. She waved again, this time with a little more confidence. It's good to meet you, Fu. In all of Naruto's letters, he has only spoken highly of his little sister. Fu wasn't sure what to say when being addressed by somebody as important as the Kazekage. She was the same with all her interactions with the Raikage, although she had been younger then. It's alright, Fu. You have no reason to feel intimidated. Naruto and I have been friends for over half my life now. Matsuri just let out a small giggle. Yeah, no reason to feel intimidated except that you control sand and we're in the middle of a desert. Gara just looked at her with a tired smile, while Fu looked at him with an odd expression she saved for things that truly impressed her. Was that really necessary, Matsuri? Now she'll... That's so cool! How do you control sand? Do you have a bloodline? How much can you control? What can you make it do? Can you lift the desert? Gara's eyes widened slightly at the rush of questions, his fears apparently unfounded as he began to see Naruto's influence on the young girl. Fu, I already told you before, Gara's abilities come from Shukaku. He's Ninjuki like us. Fu blushed a little, although it was hard to tell from the color of her skin. Ah, yeah, I forgot. Naruto just laughed and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder before returning his attention to the one he had really missed over the years. Hey Tsuya, long time no see. The redhead just scowled and stormed over. Naruto actually flinched because he thought he had done something wrong, only for Tayuya's lips to smack into his own. His eyes opened wide only for the briefest of seconds before they closed, and he wrapped his arms around Tayuya's waist so his hands could rest squarely on her bum. Her tongue asked for entrance, and he didn't deny it as they began a sparring match different from the normal shinobi. Everybody else in the room just watched on, astonished and trying to hold in their blushes at the very open display of affection. Fu was finding it very strange to see her brother in this way, even after sneaking out some of those pictures Tayuya had sent him and nearly passing out from shock. Finally, the two remembered that people need air to live and parted, smiling and panting with a line of saliva managing to hold them together. Wow. Wow. Both just stared at one another, still with that same smile before Gara cleared his throat loudly. Yes. Well, reading aside, Tayuya has already delivered her report, so would you mind telling me of what you accomplished on your training mission? Naruto just smirked devilishly. Oh, I think it would be better to just show you. Plus, I want to make sure that Tayuya-chan really has been training. He was surprised when the redhead showed no irritation at him using the affectionate suffix. He hadn't even meant to do it. He didn't even meant to it. It just slipped out. Fine with me, shithead. I missed being able to beat you for 2 years. Naruto just smiled. He was so looking forward to this. There was an almost serene air in the training ground as Naruto and Tayuya stared across at each other, both smirking. Gara, Matsuri, and Fu all stood off to one side, watching with anticipation for somebody to make the first move. Usually by now, Naruto would have trudged in. He was always better at coming up with plans on the fly than actual forethought. Gara just smiled. It seemed he had managed to learn some patience with age. So, Tayuya-chan, how much do you want me to hold back? Tayuya scowled by smirking slightly, very confident in her stance. Oh, I wouldn't hold back if you know what's good for you. In a millisecond, she had her flute out and up to her lips, intending to finish this quickly and show him that much hadn't changed over time. What she wasn't expecting was for Naruto to have already covered the decent 50 feet between them and snatched the flute out of her hands before she even realized it was gone. You know, you really shouldn't rely on your flute so much, Tayuya-chan. The redhead had a second to get over her shock at how fast Naruto moved. She hadn't even seen him use the Fuji no Iki. She couldn't believe that anybody was that fast naturally. It just wasn't physically possible. The only person she had heard of that or even approached to those speeds was the Raikage in his lightning release armor, and Naruto didn't have the swirling blue aura. She didn't give him the chance to get close again. As she thrust her hands into the ground, instantly cracks spread out from her position in concentric rings before the earth cracked and shook, imploding from the inside. Naruto, who was in the piece of earth beneath him, Naruto, who was in the process of moving towards her again, was thrown completely off balance as the piece of earth beneath him was uprooted. The problem with moving at the speeds he did was it was a painful landing if you tripped. Luckily, he caught his bearings in time to land on his hand right next to Tayuya. She tried to lash out with a swift kick, but when you fight Naruto, your movements have to be more than swift. Still on his hands, he dodged out of the way, returning the kick with a lightning-fast jab of his own. Tayuya tried to block, but his leg snaked under her arm and caught her neck. The next thing she knew, his hands were around her feet, and he was flipping her over to land painfully on her back. He smiled down at her with mirth that just irritated her. She smirked as well as Naruto began to see stars and slumped off her body. What? Tayuya calmly got to her feet and brushed the dirt off her clothes while looking down at Naruto. You like it? You have those otonin to thank for it. Vibration is a powerful thing, and if you get just the right frequency, there's nothing you can't do. She kicked Naruto hard in the stomach to show his defeat, while thinking how disappointing how disappointed that this was so easy. Her first mistake was underestimating Naruto, as she soon found out when the clone burst an explosion that would make an explosion tank seem meek. Tayuya was sent spinning through the air to land on her arm as she felt it crack painfully from the force. She let out a grunt and looked around, hoping to catch a glimpse of the real Naruto before he could take advantage of her vulnerability. Not seeing him, she quickly lit up her hand in a green chakra shroud and passed it over her injury, feeling the pain melt away as bones and muscles knitted themselves back together. Well, medical jutsu, that's cool. Her eyes opened in shock as she spun around to see Naruto staring over her shoulder. She hadn't even noticed he was there. She lashed out with her foot, which Naruto calmly caught and threw back at her, launching her away from him. She flipped and landed gracefully on her feet, wasting no time in activating a seal on her wrist, the inspiration for which came from Naruto himself. A large metal bow staff burst into existence in a poof of smoke and was deftly caught in an expert grip. Naruto just did what he always did, sped in at a nearly invisible pace, figuring he would dodge any attack thrown at him. That was why his eyes lit up in surprise when he saw the blue lightning charge down the metal staff, and he reacted too slow before the pulse struck him in the cheek. He was sent hurtling back with an impressive force to impact not in a tree, but through it. Lightning chakra infused through the staff to speed up its speed and hitting power. Tayuya just nodded with a happy smile from her position in the middle of the field. Naruto felt Kurama pull his dislocated jaw back into its socket, and he tested it once or twice to see if it was working. He stood up, this time smiling at the great fight he was getting from his girlfriend. Good thing you're not the only one with a lightning affinity. He focused as he concentrated on the flow of chakra through his body, manipulating it so that it rubbed together, creating the static required for all lightning jutsu. Instead of releasing it like he should have, he allowed it to build up, diverting it into his muscles. When it became too great, he felt it crackle over his nerve endings, giving him a sort of euphoric high that always came with this technique. Finally, he passed the wind chakra to his tenketsu, letting it build up before he let it all go in one burst. Swift release. Naruto vanished. The dirt wasn't even kicked up to show that his foot had moved. It simply looked like he had popped out of existence. In the same moment, Tayuya felt 3 sharp blows come from all sides before a leg below her kicked her up into the air and batted her around. Nobody could even see a blur. Tayuya just looked like she was bouncing around in thin air, and all the spectators minus Fu were very confused. What technique is Naruto using? Gaara turned to Fu, who was just smiling at the performance her Oni-san was putting on. It's called Swift Release. It's used by combining his lightning and wind affinities. He forces lightning chakra into his muscles like the lightning releases armor of the Raikage, but not enough to give him the aura. Then he forces wind chakra out of his Tenketsu to propel him in the direction he needs to go. I've never seen him use it so early in a fight before. Tayuya must be pretty good. Gaara just nodded. He had received an abridged version of her training, and he agreed that she was good. Their attention returned to the spar, where Naruto finally reappeared out of a blur, allowing Tayuya to drop to the ground, riddled with bruises and a few broken bones. Naruto stopped a short distance away, panting for breath. Moving that fast made it difficult to breathe, not to mention the control and chakra required were astonishing. He looked over to Tayuya to see if it was over yet, only to see her stand back up confidently, the green chakra already doing its job of healing her body up. Now he knew how his opponents must feel when they saw his body miraculously heal from Kyuubi's chakra. It was actually a little annoying. That was a nice move, Naruto, but it's my turn now. She bit her thumb and flashed through a few hand seals too fast for Naruto to follow before slamming her hand down into the ground. Summoning jutsu, a white cloud erupted from her hand, bathing half of the training grounds before dispersing to reveal a small army of falcons hovering with their wings. Sound cage. Naruto didn't have too much time to react before the falcons flew over to him and surrounded him in a perfect circle. They all opened their beaks and cried out at a frequency that was too high for a normal human to hear, but perfect for Naruto. It came from all sides of him, forcing him to cover his ears from the pain of it. Taiyo watched on, confident that this would be her victory, before Naruto stopped clutching his ears in pain and stood up, as if the falcons weren't even there. She just looked on in shock, wondering if she had managed to deafen him before he pointed to his ears and shouted, "Trucker earplugs! They're designed to kick in at a certain volume so I don't get deafened, but I can't activate them manually to block out your jutsu." He was shouting a little because he couldn't hear his own voice, and Taiyo scowled at the simple yet obvious answer to her technique. Not wanting to give him any more time to recover, she rushed in, bow staff already trailing chakra and ready to use. Sounds of pain. She brought the staff around in a low swing, moving so fast that the lightning in the metal rod actually created a noise as it split the air in its path. Naruto dodged the strike and tried to return one of his own, but as he hit Ryuya in the shoulder, his hand simply phased right through her. However, any doubts that this wasn't a clone were shattered when she brought the staff around again and connected with the side of Naruto's leg. The lightning in the pole numbed the nerve endings when she struck, causing Naruto to briefly lose control of his leg, allowing the redhead to get off 3 more strikes before he could jump back. It was lucky he was so used to having powerful electricity running through his muscles, or he was sure he would be on the ground in spasms. As it was, he was forced to dodge clumsily as Kurama went about repairing the damaged nerves and fixing his ability to send signals where they need to go. Taiyo didn't let up though, and whenever he dodged, she would be right there with another blow waiting to strike him. Her staff moved so quickly it left a trail of light arcing about behind her and continuing to create a melody as it ripped through air molecules. Finally, she let up, moving backwards as Naruto caught his breath and allowed the fox within him to heal the last of the damage. Damn shithead, you got pretty fast while you were away. Nobody's ever been able to dodge me for so long. Naruto just shrugged, hiding the fact that he still wasn't quite 100%. Sorry, but I'm going to finish this up now. Pain in stereo. She held out her hand in a familiar hand seal, and instantly she was joined by a clone, one Naruto knew was just as real as she was. Both smirked as they brought up their staffs, both coated in lightning chakra, and both looked ready to use it. Naruto suddenly found himself dodging from an assault on both sides as the clone and the original moved in perfect tandem. If ever so often their staff would bounce off one another, creating a flash of sparks were created and were released, and they used the push to bring the poles around even faster. Naruto was hard pressed, and soon he had to resort to swift release to prevent himself from being hit at all. He forced the chakra where it needed to go, and instantly the world around him slowed down. He could see the individual streaks of lightning as they arced from their metal conductors, and every breath that the two Taiyus took. He dodged the next swing of her staff as if it were being swung by a child before launching at her with a lightning-fast fist to the gut. The low-motion Taiyo opened her eyes wide and began to shake, not actually being able to see the blur that her body became as it tried to vibrate out of harm's way. It didn't work. Naruto was just too fast, and an instant later she was across the field, clutching her stomach before poofing into a non-existence, signifying Naruto had chosen the wrong girl. As if to hammer that point home, the Hyuga behind him tried to knock him in the back of his head with a quick jab, but in the instant the metal touched his skin, he was already moving, the lightning not even fast enough to reach him before he was standing where the clone had disappeared. Taiyo panted as Naruto returned to the realm of the visible, deactivating the towering technique. Damn it, shithead, just stay still already. Naruto just smirked and raised an eyebrow questioningly. It wouldn't be a very good spar if I did that, would it? Taiyo just scowled and surprised Naruto by pulling out another flute from her pouch, obviously a replacement for if someone did exactly what Naruto had. Naruto quickly activated his earplugs before she could even put the metal to her lips, exactly what she was hoping for. She blew out a quick sequence of notes and all the falcons she had summoned. and which Naruto had unfortunately forgotten about, swooped down on him from above. The blonde was assaulted with a hail of beaks and feathers as he lashed out as she lashed out without really looking, dispelling summons with every strike, while at the same time trying to save his clones from the sharp beaks and clothes. When he finally got them all, he tried to peer through the smoke they had created upon dispelling, only for Taiya to burst out of it, bow staff ready to take Naruto's head off. He flipped back, narrowly avoiding the blow as it sailed on and impacted with the ground. He gulped at the large crater the single blow had formed, reminding himself not to be on the receiving end of one of those. They both had returned to the spots they had started in, panting and out of breath from all the techniques they had been throwing around. Naruto clutched his wrist, intent on finishing this before it got out of hand. Quickly, a Rasengan the size of his head appeared in his hand, but he lowered its concentration so it wouldn't kill you if it hit. Come on, she said. You know I'm not going to let you get near enough to use that thing. Naruto just smiled. Then it's a good thing I learned how to do this. In a flash, he thickened the chakra shell around the spinning orb and flung it towards Taiya, smiling at the shock on her face as the condensed chakra flew through the air. It was connected to Naruto's hand, still by a thin string of pulsing blue light, and faster than Taiya could say chakra thread. It smacked her straight in the stomach. All the condensed energy inside the sphere was finally released as the coating dissolved. The end result was Taiya flying backwards from the shockwave it created. Naruto calmly waited for the impact zone to clear of smoke and dust. When it did, it revealed Taiya shakenly getting to her feet, staring at Naruto with defiance. Nice try, shithead, but it's going to take more than that to put me down. Naruto just smiled instantly as he pulled on the chakra thread connected to his other hand. Taiya followed it with her eyes right down to the spot near where she was standing as the seal suddenly revealed itself, along with 4 others all around her. Before she could utter another word, a bright purple barrier sprung up, completely sealing her into a prison of light. You were saying, Taiya-chan? Taiya just pouted cutely, crossing her arms under her chest in frustration. No fair, shithead. Naruto just grinned his foxy smile. I think that means I win. End of chapter 39.